So again, apologies for that executive session running a little bit over there. But we did call this meeting to order at 5:30 earlier today, and I did previously ask Peter if it was properly warned. Isn't that correct, Peter?
That is correct, and I answered yes, it has been properly warned. Thank you.
Thank you. Didn't want to be the only person saying that. So welcome once again to Tuesday, July 28th, special meeting of the Brattleboro Select Board. We have one item on our agenda to speak about representative town meeting. And the first thing on our, well, it's more than one item on our agenda, but that's our unfinished business that we're getting to tonight. First thing is chair's remarks, and I just had sort of a, well, another brave COVID-19 new world, something you'd never be talking about in the old world. I recently got into a conversation with Chris Grotke, who of iBrattleboro. So credit to him for sort of figuring this out, which should have been obvious to all of us, but it wasn't at the time. Chris pointed out that it's fairly easy to basically copy and paste the chat log of these meetings. In the past, I've told people that, correctly so, that the chat is not seen by anybody watching on BCTV. So that should be remembered for anybody, you know, talking in chat or trying to communicate. And it's also not seen if somebody's watching later, either via BCTV or through GoToMeeting. However, there is a way to copy and paste, which I should have realized. And also there is a way to do that directly through GoToMeeting. We've discovered this now, and I think it's only fair to let people know that because it's possible, it should automatically become part of the public record because it exists. So I think what we're going to do is treat it as part of the public record, but print it out, have it available as a PDF if people request it. But we're not going to do anything like attach it to minutes or anything like that. It'll be similar to our backup materials that are always available to the public as well upon request. So just a weird little bit of procedural business there. And I think I will leave it at that for my remarks. Manager's comments is next. Peter?
Thank you. I have none this evening, other than regarding RTM. Thank you.
Thank you. Other select board comments, committee reports, musings? Oh, Brandy.
Here we go. Can you hear me?
Yes.
So this evening, before going to bed, my partner and I will be burying our 8-month-old kitten, who was hit by a fast traveling car on Green Street, which did not stop in the middle of the day today. I have already told our town manager, expressed my concerns about the way that people use Green Street as basically a race to get to Elliott Street. There is a minimum of 5 families with young children on this street, several dogs, there's children biking and scootering on sidewalks. There's dogs being walked constantly. I can't even say the number of dogs that at any time could slip a leash if they saw a squirrel. The YMCA summer camp bus currently picks up and drops off across the street from my house at the school. And so I would implore people to maybe suck up the 30 seconds of time that you might lose and not use a school zone and residential area as your personal racetrack. I have been on the sidewalk before with friends chatting, and we have had an impulse to jump into the grass because cars have gone by so quickly, even though we're clearly on a sidewalk and not standing in the road, but it's been that startling. We've had walls shake. I've had motorcycles wake me up because they're revving and flying at speeds that are clearly made for the interstate or at least Route 30. And I will be finding a way to get a petition I want to see the same kind of speed bumps that they have by Memorial Park here by the Green Street School, because I'm terrified. There's a guy that has his young children that are riding their scooters, and all it takes is for somebody to drop something in the road or for a ball to go in the street, and somebody driving the way they did when they killed our cat. And we haven't even, we have 4 kids we have to tell this to. We have her brother sitting here, and we're going to bury our cat today because somebody was so thoughtless as to use the residential area as a speed ramp and did not even bother to stop. Thankfully, 2 of our neighbors were outside, wrapped the cat in a blanket, and waited for us, basically, so that they could give her to us.
Oh, sorry about that, Brandy. It's been a lot of discussion on the Traffic Safety Committee about the various street problems with speeding. Ian, I think first by the split second.
After you, Daniel.
Thanks, Ian. I'm on the Traffic Safety Committee this year, and I would like for us to put this on the agenda for our next one meeting. And I'm really sorry that this happened. I live on a street with a lot of young children as well, just up by the high school, and I'm concerned sometimes about the speed which people enter that street, and I worry about my 5-year-old neighbors. I do have a separate comment about the Everyone Eats program, which is a program that has is about to launch on Monday and is being promoted right now. It's a food relief program in Brattleboro that will serve people in Brattleboro, Guilford, Vernon, Dummerston, or Putney whose food security has been challenged by COVID-19 due to unemployment, underemployment, homelessness, etc. 150 meals per day will be available on Monday through Thursday from August 3rd through the 27th. And you do not need to sign up. You don't need to prove your eligibility. The best thing to do probably is to go online, and if you Googled or used another search engine, Everyone Eats Brattleboro, you will find it very easily. And that is all I have.
Thanks, Dan. Yeah.
Yep. So I've been also, Brandy. I'm really sorry to hear that as well. Yeah. On a brighter note, I've been announcing about the voting for the primary and the general election. So I'll post the My Voter page link where you can update your registration address and your physical and mailing address, and you can request an absentee ballot there. There's no in-person early voting for the August primary, but one of the things I'm going to change for this announcement and for the ones going forward is we're getting to the time for the primary where mailing it back in is dangerous for the potential of it not getting there in time. So there is a box in the municipal center parking lot that says, I think it says, and Peter, you can correct me because you see it, ballots here, or
That's right, ballots here.
Ballots here. So it gets checked all the time. What's that?
In big letters.
In big letters, in big letters. It gets checked all the time. And you can see Tim is taking a real nice blurry picture there showing it.
No, it's not blurry here.
So it gets checked all the time, and you should take your absentee ballot and put it in that box. If to be safe, probably doing that from going forward to make sure that your ballot gets counted. And the instructions are very clearly written out on how to properly fill out your absentee ballot. Please read them carefully and complete them the way that they explain it for you to do. It's very important that they're done correctly, because if you don't do it correctly, your vote won't be counted.
Thank you, Ian. And I think that includes returning the other ballots, if I'm not mistaken.
The blank ones.
Very important.
Read the instructions.
Yes, but I mean, that's a big one for me. So any other board comments? Liz, we're all good?
All good.
Great. Well, next on our agenda is public participation. And again, this is the moment where you are welcome if you are with us in the meeting, or in the meeting via computer, or in the meeting via phone, to shout out and say something not concerning our unfinished business of representative town meeting scheduling. So I'm going to go ahead and go to Ricky, who's hanging on. And thank you, Ian, for making the stack clear. Here I am using the correct phrase. Is that right, Daniel? Thank you. Ricky, go ahead if you want to turn on your... I am going to try to be better at asking people to identify the town they're from and their name. And if you can, turn on your camera, because it's great to have a visual. Go ahead, Ricky. Are you still with us? Okay, while Ricky is working on that, I was just going to look to see if there's anybody on the phone. Doesn't look like there is, except Brandy, sort of. So Ricky, are you able to chime in?
Ricky is still showing in the roster of people attending, and their microphone is open. But
Yeah. So it might be something with your mic, Ricky. I'll just reiterate. Okay. Ian, our clerk, will read that, so I'm not too distracted. I just wanted to reiterate that our only order of business tonight is discussion of RTM. And so I'm afraid if Ricky can't chime in with their microphone as it currently exists, then we might move on, but we may have someone else who'd like to speak. Mary Casey, would you like to chime in? And then we could go back to Ricky.
Hi, I know that I'm showing up as Mike. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Where?
We see you showing up as someone else, but that's okay.
Mike says I'm on mute. Is that true?
No, we hear you right now. And Ricky, it looks like
I'm
you're just
on mute.
hang on while we're going to go with Mary first.
I wanted to point out at last. I just wanted to point out at last week's rather difficult meeting, for a good part of the meeting, if you were attempting to participate by telephone, when you called the telephone number, you got a very rapid busy signal. You put my camera back on and I'm painting. So there may be an issue that you want to keep in mind if you believe that you will be participating by telephone in these meetings.
Okay, thank you, Mary. Yeah, we always say that the telephone is sort of the least optimal, but certain people do have to do it by telephone. But I think Peter and Patrick and staff could look into that.
Because I know that it's sometimes, like I'm doing tonight, I have 2 RTM members here. to keep that in mind for voting or however you may be doing it, if we want to use one device to be able to keep track of that. I was thinking one could do it by phone and another could do it by the go-to-meeting, but just keep it in mind later this evening that there may be an issue if you have a bunch of people trying to use the telephone. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks, Mary. Peter.
Just a quick comment on that. So that's actually going to be a very important input to us when we have the RTM discussion. I'll save why until we're into that discussion, but thank you, Mary, for calling that out. And of course, we also will check on just what might have gone wrong last week and try to make sure that that doesn't happen again for the select board meetings.
Thanks, Peter. Ricky, how's your microphone now, or are you still with us? It says you're offline, but then it says you're online. You sort of operate under two lines, Ricky, so just take yourself off mute if you can. I wonder if you're dialed in on two different devices. Ricky, can you hear me?
No.
No, Ricky, we can't hear you right now.
Maybe they could write their comments in the chat and we could just do it that way.
Good suggestion, Dan. Yeah, Ricky, if you think you could type it out, we could try to address something. I also think I could circle back later if we want to continue, since we only have one.
Can you hear me now?
Oh,
Yep.
Oh,
Can you hear me?
yes, yes.
go ahead.
I can hear you.
Just go right ahead. There might be a delay, but just go ahead and speak.
Yeah, I called the realtors that are selling the property 17 Main Street and 49, and I was going to buy it and turn it into, because most of the residents don't in this.
Wow, I only got a little bit of that. Okay. Someone like to be the spoken voice of Ricky?
I'd be happy to do it.
Thanks.
This is the words of Ricky Rosati. I called the realtors selling the property on 17 South Main Street. They want $49,500. Can the municipality buy it and turn it into a park? Because most residents don't have lawns here. It's been for sale for almost 2 years. I think I know the property that you're speaking of, the white one that's in need of a little TLC as you go up on the right-hand side. I guess I could continue to read the comments. Ricky says, it's been for sale for almost 2 years. It needs to be torn down. It's not livable. Thanks for the comment, Ricky.
I agree. I think that, well, I agree that I know what property Ricky is talking about. And I'm in agreement with them that probably needs to be torn down, but we're not currently on the market for such a property, as far as I understand. Liz?
Why don't we ask the town manager to look into it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a good idea.
Sure.
Will do.
Is that the is it on the west side of the street?
East.
Yeah,
Right?
because the cemetery is on the east, is it not?
Oh, you're correct. West.
It's
On the right
west.
as you go up the hill.
Up the hill on South Main.
Okay, we'll take a look at that. Thank you, Ricky. So unless there's somebody on the phone who is not one of the current board members, I think we're good to go to move on to item number 8, unfinished business. We're going to be discussing representative town meeting, a subject we're all very anxious to come to some decent movement forward on. Peter?
Thank you. Forgive me, but I'm going to take a few moments here initially to remind us how we got to where we are, because I think that's an important part of this, given the multiple steps in this process of considering how to have a representative town meeting under the current unusual circumstances in the manner that is as democratic as possible, preserves as much of the integrity of representative town meeting as possible. And so I think it's important that we talk about sort of the steps we've gone through in trying to find that way forward. We hope, when I say we, I should note for the record that there's a group of 6 of us that represent some different disciplines and some different aspects of service in town government who have been sort of the core group working on this. We've been reporting back to select board meetings and you have been receiving, as we have, a lot of public input in this setting and other settings on this matter. But I'd like to note that those of us who have been collaborating on this are Jan Anderson, the executive secretary in the town manager's office, Lauren Crisp, the elected town moderator, myself, Bob Fisher, town attorney, Hillary Francis, town clerk, who's responsible for elections, and the clerk to functions as the clerk to representative town meeting, the keeper of those minutes, and Patrick Moreland, the assistant town manager. So we've been working together on various aspects of this project. And it began back in, I guess, in earnest in May, really. So we acknowledge the story begins, of course, back in March when COVID arrived in Vermont. And we had just had at the moment when everything had to shut down, we had just had our representative town meeting informational meeting on Wednesday, the 11th of March. By the 13th, 2 days later, the governor had announced the state of emergency in Vermont, and there was quite a lot of beginning of shutting down occurring. By the middle of the next week, on the 17th, 18th timeframe of March, virtually everything, public and private, had gone into the stay home, stay safe mode. And so we came up a few days short of being able to hold representative town meeting in the normal manner at the BOHS gym. Actually, it would have been at the BAM's multi-purpose room this year, but in any event, to be gathered together in one room on March 21st, Saturday, March 21st, was impossible, and that had to be canceled. So some time passed. April was pretty well full lockdown, and we were all grappling with just how to function during COVID. We developed some pretty good functionality in a lot of different ways during that time, as we were pretty well completely staying home. In May, it was more of the same, but we began to be able to get out a little more. And because we were in sort of equilibrium at that point in terms of functioning during COVID, both within town government and more broadly in society, we kind of took on the bandwidth to be able to look ahead and say, well, how can we hold a representative town meeting? And so there was a select board meeting beginning of June, some backup materials at the end of May that laid out 6 different ways in which we might hold a meeting. Some that I felt, in offering that particular piece, I authored alone after conferring with others about it. But what I focused on, and what we had focused on in our discussions among the 6 of us, was the pods method, which I would say now is pretty well rejected. I want to make that clear as we go forward. I think there's sort of 2 viable ways forward, and we have a recommendation for one of them that will come here in a few minutes. But at that time, when we were looking at the different sacrifices that would be required if we did certain methods of holding representative town meeting in any manner other than being all together in one room, there would be some aspects of, what is rich and robust in these meetings and, the Brattleboro's expression of the democratic process that would be not able to be fully present in whatever alternative was chosen as compared to everybody being in one room. There were pros and cons. So we laid out some pros and cons that we saw sort of made it possible to have some kind of focus to that conversation, and offered up that we thought that the pods method might be the best way forward, where small groups of people would gather and then be connected electronically rather than individuals connecting electronically. Small groups would gather and be connected by BCTV. That was pretty well rejected. We've kept it under some level of sort of tangential consideration since then, just in case. It was one of the questions in the survey that was recently conducted, because it is a potential way that this meeting could have been held. But at each step, the feedback we've gotten is it kind of fails on both counts. It requires a fair amount of technological logistics to be worked out, and some investment actually for that one in terms of equipment and the way that the connectivity would be provided. And at the same time requires people in groups of perhaps up to 25 or 30 to be in a room, and from different households, people from different households being likely indoors, depending on when the meeting was actually held. There were just reasons why it didn't seem like the best way forward. So having received that feedback, and having on that evening had quite a lot of discussion about the potential pitfalls of electronic meetings like this one. We've actually just experienced a bit of that this evening in terms of what you can bump into in terms of some folks struggling. If you either have an individual who's struggling with connectivity, or in some cases when the whole platform is interrupted for one reason or another, that is a risk and a potential drawback of doing a meeting with, right now 138 voting members of town meeting, up to potentially 149 voting members of town meeting participating in a meeting in a format like this one. So recognizing that risk, and because in that early June meeting there was quite a lot of emphasis on that downside, we brought back, the group of us, after doing some more research, to a meeting about a month ago, a recommendation to hold the meeting in two parts this year. This parallels a way in which regular open town meeting is held in some communities in Vermont, where there is an information meeting held where people gather and talk about the items that are on a warned, the articles that are on a town meeting warning, and then the voting occurs by Australian ballot. It is a legal method of holding such a meeting under Vermont statutes, and it is a not uncommon method of holding a meeting like this in the communities that have open town meeting. During the discussion, when we brought that forward, there was renewed interest in an all online meeting. There was quite a lot of concern about the one major drawback. So the benefit of doing the Australian ballot alternative is that that every elected member and ex officio member of representative town meeting who is empowered to cast a vote on the various articles can do that, because the balloting would be done by Australian ballot. Connectivity wouldn't be an issue, and risk aversion to gathering with other people wouldn't be an issue. Everybody could be basically an absentee ballot voting system for representative town meeting this year. So everyone's right to vote who currently has a right to vote in representative town meeting, that would be preserved. We liked that a lot. We in this committee of us that have been working on this thought that was a very important aspect of that, and that's why we brought that forward as our recommendation a month ago. The feedback we got and you got a month ago was, let's not give up on holding a representative town meeting fully online, because the main drawback, and it is a huge drawback to doing the Australian ballot alternative, is that there's no opportunity for the members of representative town meeting to modify the questions that are posed on that ballot. The legally required method of warning the meeting and then holding the meeting is such that the timing is too close together for there to be actions taken in a discussion format that would modify the ballot that would then be voted. And so there's no opportunity to amend. As you know from participating in representative town meeting, there's always robust discussion and are often amendments offered on various articles. And so that was known and identified a month ago to be a significant drawback. But yet, in order to preserve the integrity of every elected member being able to cast the ballot they had been elected to cast, what we brought forward to you for consideration was the Australian ballot two-part option. Information meeting online, followed by voting by Australian ballot. During that discussion, when you got a lot of feedback that people wanted to try to hold an online meeting, at least the people who were commenting last month, there was a strong sentiment to not give up on that alternative, look into it further, see if it might be possible. You directed us to conduct a survey. So in addition to doing some additional research about how a meeting might be conducted all online, you wanted information from the members of representative town meeting about their ability to participate in a meeting that would be all online. And the results of that survey were very helpful in shaping the information that we brought forward tonight. So in this continued evolutionary process, for reasons I'll explain a little more fully in a moment, I'll get to the moment of sort of pulling back the curtain on the recommendation for anybody who hasn't read the backup. We are recommending to you tonight with some trepidation, but believing that it can be accomplished if you are tolerant of the risks involved. We're recommending that the meeting be held on Zoom. Zoom instead of GoToMeeting, because of a couple of features that are particular to Zoom that differentiate it from GoToMeeting, which are that instead of having to identify yourself in the chat as being interested in making a comment, there's actually a hand raising feature. So the members in a meeting much larger than this, that will be really important. We know that it's been challenging, even when we've had 70 or 80 people in these meetings, it's been challenging to manage the, taking turns speaking and who's next and that process through the chat box. But if it's a hand raising feature, it's really clear who among the participating members of the meeting are asking at any given time for the opportunity to speak. In addition, for voting, which is a really significant concern to make sure that voting can be done in an orderly manner, the Zoom has a yes or no voting feature where at the times of actually determining a matter, voting on one of the articles, Lauren Crisp as moderator would be able to call a question and have the members of representative town meeting each either click yes or no on the Zoom controls that are available to each participant. And the tally of that is actually automatic for the meeting organizer's screen. It'll come up immediately as being how many yeses and how many nos. So that process will be efficient. One thing we have not yet fully worked out that you should know we have not yet fully worked out, although there is time between now and when representative town meeting would be held, and we're confident that we can work this out, is in a meeting like this where certain people are entitled to vote and other people are invited to not just observe but also even participate but are not allowed to vote, it's going to be very important that we be able to differentiate at the moments that the votes are being taken, that we're able to identify that only the people entitled to vote are voting. And we're working on that. We don't have that solved yet, but we believe that it can be addressed satisfactorily. So our collective opinion is that we don't know all the answers yet as to exactly how this would be held, but we had a hard deadline that we needed to meet to report back to you and move this matter forward. And we feel confident that if you feel satisfied with what's being presented to you in written material in advance of this meeting and in the discussion that we all have tonight, we feel confident that we can identify the things, address the things that still need to be addressed in order to hold a meeting on Zoom as the platform in a fully online representative town meeting that would not be relying on Australian ballot for voting, and therefore would preserve the opportunity for that full debate and the opportunity for amendments to be offered and voted upon by representative town meeting in real time on one day in that setting as a fully online meeting. It comes with the downside risk that individuals might bump into some connectivity issues and that there might be some other technical issues that we bump into just in the operation of the meeting. And so we probably should vet that a little further, and you need to be satisfied as a group that those risks are tolerable if we move forward to warn a meeting to be held in that manner. But based on the feedback we've received, so going to the survey results, we are recommending that because we believe that it reflects both the majority desire of representative town meeting and the collective capacity of the representative town meeting members. And what I mean by that is we asked explicitly, would people be willing to hold the pods style meeting? And 35% of the representative town meeting members said no. We asked explicitly about doing the Australian ballot method of holding the meeting, and 25% of the representative town meeting members said no. So while we didn't explicitly ask the question of would you be willing to do the online meeting, because instead we asked a variety of questions about people's readiness for holding an online meeting, because that was really what was the essence of what came out of the select board's last discussion of this matter. So we didn't ask that question in exactly the same way about online, but the variety of ways in which we did ask about online resulted in us understanding that most people have the ability and the equipment and the internet service or other connectivity that would enable them to participate in a meeting. Moreover, because of the non-anonymous way, we asked people to identify themselves in responding to the survey so that we would know who they were and could help them if they had issues that needed to be, where they needed some assistance. We know exactly who the 16 members of representative town meeting are who have said, I need help. I either need some help understanding how to use equipment that I own, or I don't have any of that kind of equipment, or my computer's old, I'm not sure it has a camera, and my internet's bad, or something like that, right? We've got 16 members out of the 138 who, and incidentally, one thing I think is important to note for the record, we got 133 responses out of 138 current members. It was totally amazing, unheard of for the response rate. So representative town meeting members are eager to hold a meeting, and we're really helpful in defining, what they're interested in and what their barriers might be. And in that process, what we learned is exactly who these 16 people are and exactly what each one of them individually needs in order to be able to participate in representative town meeting online. So while we continue to have some anxiety about this platform for a meeting of 140 to 150 people and the manner in which things could go wrong, we no longer have a concern about how the individuals who otherwise might struggle would be disenfranchised by that. There's a collective risk we take, but we no longer believe that there would be anybody in the community who would be simply isolated from being able to carry out their responsibility as an RTM member, because we know who needs help, and we know there's people in the community willing to help them, and we know specifically what help each person believes they need. So, we can match people up and start addressing those needs, and we've got, 6 weeks or more to make that happen. So that's the fullness of our report. What we've brought forward to you is, laying all that information out in writing and recommending that you authorize us to come back to you a week from tonight with a representative town meeting warning that we'll call the meeting for September 12th, Saturday, September 12th, to be held on Zoom, but with full recognition that there are some unanswered questions to how this would occur, and there is inevitably going to be risk of disruption in this. And if those factors are sufficient concern to you that you'd prefer the safety of the Australian ballot split method, where there's a discussion online and then voting by Australian ballot, so that we know we can depend on everybody being able to vote by Australian ballot. If that sense of security for that alternative outweighs the benefits of the interaction, but that come along with the risk of the fully online, then please just provide us that direction. And we'll be prepared to assist you in moving forward in either direction. But we do think that absent any revelation that may come out of the public discussion of this evening, these are pretty clearly shaping up to be the two choices that remain. And for the reasons I've described, we recommend that we move forward with Zoom.
Thank you, Peter. Excellent summary. And thank you for the work of the memorandum and all 6 of you who worked on it, worked in the discussions and all that stuff. I think it would be a little bit more efficient to sort of follow the pattern we've established a little bit in the past, which is the board to kick it around a little bit and then to go to questions, because I believe that sometimes what that does is remove some concerns that people have up front. But if anybody has an objection to that, I'm happy to go to questions first. I just thought we could all chime in, or not, doesn't have to be all of us, but what do you all think? Yeah, okay. Does anybody want to jump in? I see Ian's hand up.
Yeah, I think that I have a responsibility to thank Jan, Bob, Lauren, Patrick, Peter, and Hillary, and the rest of the town staff that worked on this. I was definitely one of the vocal board members who wanted to have a survey done before we made any further decision on this. And I really want to commend you on acting on this so quickly, doing such a good job on the survey. I was just really impressed and happy to see the response rate and the pretty graphics. This is the time in a pandemic where we should take a moment and get as much information as we can to uphold the democratic principles that this town is founded on. And we did that. I really feel confident now that we've talked to everybody, that we can now move forward as a board and make an informed decision. And I appreciate all the work that you 6 and the rest of the town staff have put into this. I really appreciate it. I think the rest of the RTM representatives appreciate it. I know the rest of the board does. So thank you again so much for acting so quickly on this.
Thanks, Ian. Anybody else on the, oh, wait a minute, Peter, Daniel. Oh, sorry, I thought you were waving as well.
I was, but Liz was first.
Oh, sorry, Liz, you're a little lower, so I sometimes don't see your hand. Go ahead, Liz.
Thank you, Daniel. Peter, you did a great job of allaying my fears, and I appreciate all the work. My only remaining risk is that of sort of townwide connectivity. And I know I've been on a very large call at the beginning of the pandemic with the BDCC as they were outlining things. And that's the largest Zoom call that I've been on. Do we all have experience locally with everyone being able to manage a call of that size and staying connected?
I can't speak to an entirely local experience that any of us individually or collectively have had it with that, the way this one would be entirely local. But I'm not concerned about that. The technology intends for that. This platform can have up to 251 people on it at a time. I think the connectivity issues are much more likely to be experienced by individuals rather than the system failing. The system issues we're more concerned about are whether there are surprises that pop up, frankly. So we're really keenly focused on how to make sure that the integrity of the voting is maintained, that we don't have a situation where people who aren't entitled to vote can vote, and worse yet, maybe be able to do that in a way that we're not even able to tell who they are and correct for that, right? So we don't have an answer to that. We believe there will be an answer to that. we're working on it still. And there's resources available to us in the community. People have more expertise with these tools than we do that we expect will be able to be helpful in answering those kinds of questions. So it's those kinds of things that are more procedural, and how the meeting could possibly break down and then become, really disappointing to all of us, and not the rich democratic process we're hoping to maintain. That's what we're concerned about in terms of the overall platform, not having it just fall apart in terms of the connectivity. But individuals could lose their connectivity, and that's something we need to remain aware of and think of contingencies for. And forgive me, I want to pull back, because I want to have you be able to have this part of the discussion that you're needing and intending to have before we go into the broader discussion with the public too. But I left out something really super important because I didn't prepared to say it. So I want to, before, when you're done making comments and before we go on into the broader discussion, I'd like to speak to what Mary Casey brought up, because that's an important detail that we didn't address in the backup because we hadn't thought of it, but it came up tonight. It's a good example of something that could emerge if we haven't planned for it in a way that could affect the conduct of the meeting.
Wow. Daniel.
Thanks. I just want to echo the thanks for all the work that's gone into this, over these last several months. My concern is about the length of the meeting. We've had some pretty long online meetings recently. We've been online for about 5 or 6 hours at times, and it's pretty hard on the body and the mind. And I was just wondering whether it was in any way conceivable that this meeting could happen over 2 days rather than one. And I've heard that about the in-person meeting as well, over the last few years where we've had a couple of long ones. So is that possible?
That is possible. And if that's the decision you make, we just need to be careful about how we warn it. In order to comply with the statutes, there's this not less than 30, not more than 40 days requirement. And while that sounds bureaucratic and technical, it's the law. And that's an easy marker when what we're trying to do is pick a Saturday. If we're going to do 2 days, it could be some tricky business to make it 2 successive Saturdays, although that's obviously doable within a 10-day period. Or we could talk about, what about a Saturday and a Sunday, or some other kind of arrangement. So those would be details we'd need to address if, as a group, you lean towards a 2-day meeting.
Randy, although Liz might have had, you might have.
Go ahead, Brandy. No, I just have a comment based on what Peter said, but I'll wait till after Brandy.
Hi there. So also thank you for all the work, especially because I know you came with ideas and we were excited about them, and then we changed our mind, and then the survey. I want to talk about, so you said there was 133 people that responded out of 138. Do we know who the other 5 are? And I only ask because do they have even more serious technological issues that we need to reach out about, or were they just like out of town? I just wanted to make sure that.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Did you finish?
Oh, I was just going to say, if we thought that we should reach out to them just to say, do you have even more technology issues than the people who said they have technology issues? And if so, can we be helpful? Since it's such a small group, it would be really exciting to get as close to 100%. But I'm so impressed with 133. That is, like you said, unheard of participation. And also, back in the beginning of distance learning, my first graders class was chaos, as you can imagine. And they did some kind of a breakout group that then rejoined the group. And I don't know how they did it, but I wondered if somehow that is useful for voters versus non-voters. But I don't know how they did it. And I don't know. I just vaguely remember having to quickly help him move into a different class because he was chatty for a minute, a subclass.
So I can address both of those. Let me do the second one first because it's really easy. Zoom definitely allows for multiple rooms. It's commonly used, as Ian probably knows, in mediation these days, because you can have different parties in different rooms and the mediator can go from room to room, you know, as usually happens in in-person mediation. So so that exists. We're not sure it solves the problem we're trying to solve for reasons that I think are probably deeper in the weeds than it's worth diving into right now, but we can if you'd like. Particularly Patrick, who's the, you know, the fellow who's sort of our operating engineer behind these meetings and will be for town meeting as well, is, you know, he's pretty deep into his learning on Zoom right now and could speak to that if we need to go into that level of detail. But we don't think that having different rooms for the different types of participants is necessarily the solution, but it's something we're still looking at. The question about the other 5 members of representative town meeting, I think, is really important. And actually, as you were saying that, it occurs to me that that's something we should have offered up in our report back to you. But I'd like to explain, I guess, sort of why we didn't think to say we must go see those other 5. Even though I think now is the way you've raised this evening, yes, we should go do that. We know who they are, and they're members that have been elected to be in representative town meeting, and we need to find out about their wherewithal. If you lean in this direction of doing an online meeting, we need to make sure that they also can participate or provide them whatever help they might need. The reason that didn't occur to us is there was a very exhaustive effort made, and it included not just the 6 of us who were, you know, named in bringing this information forward to you these last couple of times, but I'd like to particularly call out Sue Fillion and the planning department staff who stepped up to assist with this, because, you know, they're skilled with SurveyMonkey. They've done a lot of community surveys before, and they offered and then followed through on doing personal follow-up with folks who were not getting back to us, right? Because it was the kind of survey where we knew who we were hearing from, we also knew who we weren't hearing from. So everybody who didn't respond in the first few days or first week or so was individually contacted. There are a small handful of members of representative town meeting for whom we don't have an email address. People who are either just not online or prefer not to give us their email address. Those people we contacted directly, and in some cases actually handed a written survey tool to them that they could fill out and bring back to us. In other cases, the planning department staff called up folks and asked them the questions and entered in the answers into the SurveyMonkey tool. So it was a really exhaustive effort to make sure we could get as much responsiveness as possible. I think that one final step of reaching back out now to the 5 we didn't hear from is absolutely something we should do.
Thanks, Peter. Liz?
I remember the informational session as something that I used an awful lot of hand sanitizer during the course of the meeting. And that's pretty much all I remember, because it was beginning of March. And I wondered if we had another one, it would A, be a practice, and B, be information that would ultimately lead to a shorter time frame for the actual town meeting. I wondered everybody's thoughts on that.
May I say something initially? So I left it out of the summary, I'm sorry, but we do anticipate holding a practice meeting, I would call it, more than an informational meeting. We did not anticipate having a full-blown informational meeting again. We could do that. We probably want to call it something else. I'd want Bob Fisher is in this meeting this evening. You also asked last month for him to provide you some legal advice about these matters, and he's done that in a written legal opinion. That's part of the backup. You might want to hear from him later on in this discussion, but he's also available to address the technicality, again, just to make sure we stay in compliance with the applicable statutes. We've held an information meeting for this representative town meeting, and we want to be careful not to duplicate actions that have been completed in compliance with the statutes. That can actually, even though that feels like it's just, you know, being careful and complete, actually can lead to complications legally for, you know, well, which one applies, you know. So I can't speak to that about the information meeting. What I can say about it is I conferred explicitly with Bob about, do we need another one? And he said, no, you've held that meeting. You shouldn't have another one, which is why we referred to the practice meeting in the written backup as being a technical dry run. It would be a meeting that would be held not as an officially warned part of this process, but as an opportunity for those who want a little practice with using the technology to come together maybe a week or so before, maybe a couple of weeks before, in case we identify some issues that need some time to troubleshoot. But you know, it probably wouldn't be 150 people. It might be several dozen people that would come on together and give it a test try. That's what we were envisioning.
Daniel.
I just want to like double down on the practice as a former teacher, as somebody that's done online training and stuff. Like, you cannot have too much practice. I don't think we should make any assumptions about what knowledge people will bring to it, even after this survey, you know. And then I had one other thing that I was going to say, and it's totally slipped my mind, so I will wait my turn and come back to it.
Peter.
I think Brandy wants to go, and then I wanted to just add in at the appropriate time my observation about Mary Casey's concern.
Brandy?
I just wanted to say that philosophically, I really agree with Liz, and mostly because it kind of feels like March was light years ago, and people might not remember that informational meeting. I mean, it's been such a blur ever since. But I hear the compliance end, but I would say, like, in a perfect world, if that wasn't an issue, I would definitely be in favor of a refresher informational meeting.
Daniel.
I remembered what it was. Could we, so was that informational meeting recorded by BCTV?
Yes.
Could we at least kind of push it out that way to,
That's a great idea.
in the same way that we pushed out the survey, we could, you know, encourage all the members to rewatch that. And they can watch it on 1.5 speed or 2 speed, skip through the, you know, they could rewatch some bits.
Yeah.
That's an important part of distance learning. Like, you watch the video and you watch it the speed that works for you, and you watch it as many times as you need.
Sure.
Thank you for that. That is a great idea. That's the way to not duplicate a part of this process that is a statutory part of the process that we've already completed, and at the same time have everybody ready for the actual town meeting. That's great. Thank you. I'm going to make a note about it.
Not
The
to,
most catchy. Oh, go ahead.
I hate to, I know I haven't commented yet on the overall presentation, but not to tack too much on, but some learners are written word learners and not watching. So I might suggest a transcript, which are super cheap, a transcript of the existing informational meeting. I don't know if that creates any problems, but I use it all the time in the video business.
Sure. Yeah, that does not create a problem. That we could send out a link to the transcript with the link to the meeting, and people could use what works best for them. That's fine.
And it could be cheaply hired out. I didn't want to pile on to staff with that suggestion, but
no problem at all.
My comments are, you know, this continues to feel like depends on the glass full, glass half full, half empty. The least bad option here. It's not a perfect, and I want to just acknowledge that there are members. I read through a lot of the comments, and there's quite a few comments. A lot of members really were itching to meet in person, and I want to let those RTM members know that I read those comments. Part of me feels that way too. But on this board, you know, just in our meeting, we've sort of, our philosophy has been, if one or two are uncomfortable, we really have to continue this way until everybody feels safe. So that's, as far as meeting in person, that's sort of overrules that for me. And then the Australia ballot, we really heard from a lot of members that actually there's quite a few members that seem to be fine with it. The phrase "this year only" was used, with the understanding that it's an emergency order situation. So I acknowledge those members too. And But for me, this solution feels like the best one, because the people that really want to be able to modify some amendments and have it feel like town meeting, I think this is the only way to do that. So I guess that's my my words of support for the recommendation.
May I speak to the Mary Casey?
Yes,
comments?
please.
So that raises, it's important in two ways. It's important in general because it's the kind of, it's an example of how we might not be able to think of everything, even as we try to think of everything to be prepared for a successful meeting. And it's something we simply didn't think about before we heard it tonight, which is there could be multiple members of representative town meeting who, in their responses to us, are anticipating that they would share a device. We need to smoke out that plan that people might have as their sort of mental idea of how they're going to participate. Like, oh, well, I'm all set because my best friend has a great new computer and I'll sit with them for this. That won't work. That will defeat the ability of us to use the Zoom hand-raising tool and voting tool as the way to hold a proper orderly meeting. We can't have people sharing devices. And one thing we've all learned from situations where we've sometimes been in these kinds of meetings where two people were in the same room with two separate devices, that can lead to chaos. So in situations, and we have a number of different situations where partners are both members of representative town meeting, they need to plan to at least be in separate rooms, maybe preferably that they be on separate premises for the participation in representative town meeting, so as not to create that interference that happens otherwise, the technical interference that will be disruptive to the meeting. So there's things like that that are not just supporting the 16 people who have said, I need some help, but still identifying and solving other potential pitfalls to this approach.
On that second point you made, I would encourage everyone to figure out a way to not only be in different rooms, but to be on different Wi-Fis, because here at my home, which I'm supposed to have fast internet, I don't know about it. You know, it's pretty fast, but when my wife tries to get on with parents during one of these meetings, I have to text her and say, I'm freezing up. So it really, you would really need to know that your connection is super fast to be able to. Yeah, I think it's probably the same way when you have kids watching a movie. You're trying to.
Yeah, it definitely, in different households, it manifests different ways, but it's a real issue we need to make sure everybody's aware of, and for their own participation, plans for how to avoid that. One other thing, I've received a text from another member of town staff regarding the transcript idea. I just want to circle back quickly to that. I spoke quickly and affirmatively on that. Oh yeah, piece of cake, we'll take care of it. Because that was an in-person meeting and not one of these, it's not a matter of just being able to crank out a transcript. I'm not sure if you know, Tim, how to take a video recording of a meeting and turn it into a transcript easily. We'll rely on your professional expertise to help us make that happen, because it is a very good idea, but we don't know how to do it.
I convert it to an audio file, send it out, it comes back, but I'll lay that all out for staff and we can decide.
Thank you.
So barring really a vote or anything, I just wanted to, maybe this is the time to go to questions from either staff or, and actually maybe should we invite Lauren Crisp to come on? And
that'd be great.
Our RTM moderator, esteemed, is invited to join us just to make any of his own comments. And then maybe we'll go to, hi, Lauren. I don't hear you yet. You might still be muted.
There we go. Now, can you hear me now? Okay. Yes, I've been listening in since the beginning of the meeting, and I have participated in the process, as Peter said, and I've also been concerned from way back in March of how we were going to make this town meeting happen and how we were going to make it happen in the most democratic way that we possibly could. Our initial recommendation, Peter has outlined. Frankly, I liked it because it ensured that everyone, all elected members of representative town meeting would be included. And I just felt that that's an important feature of whatever we do, that what we do doesn't discourage participation by elected town meeting representatives. And the nice thing about the Australian ballot, everybody gets to vote. Everybody has time to vote, and everybody has an opportunity to participate in the discussion that we would have. Now, we heard your debate at the last meeting, and there seemed to be some concern that people would not have this year an opportunity to be heard on the budget, because the budget has already been adopted. And that is true according to what Bob Fisher has provided us in terms of his legal opinion. So the budget is off the table. That is a fairly significant piece or article, one in which we always spend a fair amount of time debating, and amendments are typically offered. However, along the lines of the general thrust of that last meeting, we looked, as Peter said, deeper, did this survey, and I believe that a Zoom meeting could be workable. I'm familiar with Zoom to some extent. I use it with a fair degree of frequency, and it works fairly well. But, and here's where I've got to express a little bit of a concern that I have. We saw it tonight. Ricky Rosati had a problem in making her opinion and her position known. She had some kind of a technical glitch. Mary Casey tonight had the same issue. They have been effectively denied access, not because they weren't here, but because of the technology. That's my concern. So I would like to say, for whatever you decide, first of all, as town moderator, I will respect and gladly participate in. That's number one. I would also point out, as Daniel has intimated earlier, there is no question that if we have a formal meeting, in that sense, a Zoom meeting, it will take longer, no question about it. I am compelled to follow Robert's rules. There will be, if we have a formal meeting, a more lengthier process, because not only will we have to take into consideration the matters that we typically on an annual basis have to consider, but we're also going to have to consider the technological issues that are going to slow us down. For whatever it's worth in your deliberation, what we had recommended at your last meeting is a more informal approach. And that does not require adherence to Roberts because it doesn't have a formal meeting. You've got to bear that in mind. What the earlier recommendation has going for it is that it eliminates the connectivity problems. It does ensure that all of the elected representatives will be included because they all will have time to register their vote through Australian means. So what I basically am telling you is I'm torn. And I have a hard time in sitting here and saying, well, you should do the more formal approach to the Zoom meeting. I do think it will work. The legislature uses Zoom, although I must say that the legislature, the first couple of times they used it, didn't go all that great. But they use it. They have a similar size gathering. So for whatever it's worth, I'll respect whatever you decide. I think it could happen either way. And if you think that the formal approach is better, I see no problem eventually working out most of the glitches, but there will be some people who are going to be excluded.
Thanks, Lauren. Yeah, I was close to being right in that middle zone too, so that's definitely heard. I think we should go to some public / representative town meeting members. Obviously, if you're a representative town meeting member, you definitely should be feeling free to chime in if you'd like. And if you're public, of course, you're welcome as well. And I have a stack provided by our intrepid clerk. Thank you, Ian. First up is Millicent Cooley, who I think earlier said she had 2 questions. So Millicent, you're welcome to join us. And Lauren, you could stay on if you'd like. It's up to you.
Sure.
Okay. Hello.
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 Hi, thank you. And thank you again for all the work you put into this. I second my appreciation. A couple of questions. Lauren said that the budget is off the table because of what's happened so far. So can you tell me how many articles are left for voting that are still on the table? That's one question. Should I give you all my questions or one at a time and get an answer? Probably give them all to you, right? Because I have like 3 questions.
Probably, that's best. Thank you.
Okay. On the question of technical exclusion, I agree with that as an issue from Lauren. There are some people available. I would be one of them, willing, and I think there are a number of others who could help get people prepared in advance. You know, like I have taken laptops to people so that they could get into a meeting, for example. I think that could at least be mitigated with some good preparation. I don't know that it would be solved, but it could be mitigated. Third is I liked Daniel Quip's suggestion about breaking it up into 2 days, except until I know how many articles are left, I don't know how big that would be. But I'm wondering if it's possible or practical to or feasible to break it to deal with the easy issues first. When I read through the articles in February or whenever they were handed out, it seemed like there were certain ones that seemed like it would be fairly easy to get consensus on, and that if that consensus were achieved early, for example, there was an article about, should we renew the salary for the town clerk? Okay, then the town could get on with its business more quickly if we could get through those things. Where there's other things that are likely to be, more contentious, more people will disagree with them, they'll take more time. So that's just another, possible suggestion. And I don't know if that's feasible. And then finally is a comment about reps not being able to be reached. And I think it's probably without, maybe beyond the scope of this particular discussion. But I just want to say personally, I don't know if these reps can be reached because they don't want to be. But we're, as representatives, I feel like we need to be able to be reachable by the public. We represent the town and the public, and I feel an obligation to be reachable on the part of the reps.
Sure. Definitely.
So those are my questions and comment.
Thanks, Millicent. Peter?
Yeah, I can answer a couple of those, I think, quickly, and then some of the others might require more conversation. But 19 articles, Millicent, which is the same length as the original warning. And all the 18 of the 19 are substantively the same. The 19th, not by number, but just in terms of the grouping, the only one of the 19 that has substantively changed is the budget article, which speaks now to the collection of taxes. You'll recall from prior representative town meetings that the budget article usually deals with the approval of the town budget and the declaration of deadlines and penalties and so on regarding the payment of taxes. It's usually both things in one article. And so the taxation part of that remains for this 19 item warrant. The technical assistance piece, thank you, first of all, Millicent, for you and your team that made yourselves available to the community through COVID to address these sorts of things far beyond just the boundaries of town government and representative town meeting. We're aware of that, of course, and so we anticipated that you and or your team and or others in the community who are willing to provide this sort of help could be, in fact, connected to the 16 folks who need some kind of help. As it relates to equipment, we think we probably can address most of the equipment needs that we've identified with loaners from the library, because we have some loaner equipment from the library that would be suitable for participating in this kind of a meeting. So we'd have to be sure of that, where we believe that's true. And then if we had to, connect some other people to other equipment, we'd work through that detail. Our greater concern is the folks who need some help just functioning with the equipment and the connectivity. And for those, we think that they very well may need to have some in-meeting assistance as well. So what we're anticipating is connecting resources ahead of time so folks can get comfortable with how they would connect into the meeting and participate in the meeting. And then a separate group of people likely, or at least some of them would be different. You would be one who would be participating in the meeting. So not available to be providing technical assistance on town meeting day, but could provide help to people ahead of time. There might be other people like you, or there might be people within your team of technical assisters who aren't town meeting members and would be willing to be a buddy on town meeting day. But we see the need for some buddies, and we think that's just a community resourcing challenge, just to make sure that folks who feel like they want to have somebody at their side on town meeting day to help make sure that they just don't fall out of the meeting and have no idea how to get back in, would have that help from a neighbor.
Thank you.
And I think, I'll just offer, because I'm not sure you covered it unless I totally zoned out for a moment, Peter, I apologize. But Millicent brought up, she sort of brought up consensus, and we of course have to follow Robert's rules, not only with town charter, but state statute, I would imagine. Yeah, I think there's a discretionary decision there about how you order the meeting. The 2 cents I would offer on that question is that condensing all of the what appear to be easy items as a group and all of the what appear to be potentially more contentious items as a group may actually make the meeting lopsided in a way that could end up challenging, especially if it is a 2-day meeting where maybe all the hard stuff would be on one day, so to speak. So
I think there's 19 items of business to get through, whether it's in one day or in two. There's some more discussion you ought to have about what you think is the appropriate approach to that. And if that leads us to reordering some items, we can work with you to make that happen. But I think the 1 day versus 2 days is a more fundamental decision for you to make than the order of business.
Okay. Thanks, Millicent. I would love to go to David and Ricky in our stack, and then, of course, as soon as I said that, Oscar jumped on. But what I was going to say is that right after Ricky, can we take a break? Because we've been going since 5:30, and a screaming child I could use. My wife could use some backup with, I think. But Oscar, so I might ask for that deference if you don't mind. Let's go to, wait a minute, Ian, did you change the, oh, no, you didn't. David Levenbach.
Hi, thank you. My camera doesn't like my face, so it won't let me show you myself, but I'm here. I would like first to commend town staff for the fine job with the survey. Second, I am quite sympathetic to what Daniel had to say about the length of the meeting. But if I heard town manager correctly, the date he has set is the 11th of September?
12th. The 12th of September.
12th, okay. Well, let me double check this, but I think I did a quick check. If you do a second Saturday successive week, you run into Rosh Hashanah. So I don't know if that is,
we did see that.
So that may argue for Sunday. I wasn't planning on adding a third point, but in response to Mr. Crisp, whose thoughts I do seriously respect, I would argue for the Zoom approach, because otherwise the vote, the Australian ballot, is a sort of fixed voting agenda given by the select board. So people either vote for or against motions framed by the select board. And the Zoom meeting does offer the opportunity to make amendments and gets us into what I think is a more democratic process. And with that, I'm done. Thank you.
Thanks, David. Ricky, would you like to chime in concerning RTM and our discussion around that? And I know Ricky was having some trouble earlier. If you can't hear me again, my questions were, should I read this out, everyone? Okay.
Please.
If you can't hear me again, my questions were, will anyone motion a meeting time limit to 4 hours max per? That might mean per day. But no, I mean, I don't think so. Does anybody else want to comment on that?
Sure. I don't think we should do that either.
They said per meeting, will the representative votes be recorded?
I can speak to the votes recording. So that's actually one of the things that we're working on as part of that just critically important piece about making sure that only the elected and ex officio members of representative town meeting vote. Depending on the solution to that, sort of fundamental issue. If we don't satisfactorily solve that, we put the integrity of the meeting at risk, right? So we will solve it. And because we don't yet know how we will solve it, we don't know for sure that we'll be able to have a tally of how each individual person voted. What I'd say about that is we've had a very robust discussion among the 6 of us about it. It is desirable to have that all be as transparent as possible. And for people who are watching the day-long in-person meeting, there's an opportunity for, because of how BCTV telecasts that meeting, to sort of keep an eye. When there's a vote that happens, BCTV pulls back to a wide view of the body. You don't see every single individual, but you see most of the members, perhaps many of them clearly enough to be able to recognize them. So when people are standing to vote, in the typical manner that happens, there is some transparency as to how an individual is voting on a particular matter. But in the absence of a roll call vote, which is very rare at representative town meeting, we don't actually have a listed yay or nay for every member. And so it might be that depending on how we solve the technical challenge of making sure that the integrity of the voting is maintained, that we don't end up with a full person by person tally. And I think if that is necessary, if that's a necessary sacrifice in order to maintain the integrity of only the 138 voting, and the right 138 being the ones who are allowed to vote and therefore casting the votes, we lose a little something in terms of what we'd like to achieve in full transparency for how each individual member voted, but it isn't that different from the regular meeting when we're in person.
All right. Yeah, and it's true that unless division is called, there wouldn't be individual anyway. There would just be a count, an exact count versus a visual. Yeah.
So many of the votes are done on a voice vote. There would be none of those this time. Everything would be done essentially on a division of the House. But just like in a regular town meeting, there would only under certain extreme circumstances be a roll call vote where every individual was on the record with their own vote.
Right. Ricky is expressing their preference for roll call voting. Just wanted to make that clear. And Bob Fisher offered to speak to the 4-hour limit. So I'd like to invite Bob on, and then I think we'll take a break if that's okay.
If you can hear me, yes?
Yes.
Okay. Because the meeting is done by Robert's rules, there would be no ability to limit it to just 4 hours. So that's really off the table with regard to it. Now, if the board wished to hold a 2-day meeting, I certainly, it could be warned in such a way as to do that, but it's really up to Lauren Crisp and, being the moderator to allow people an adequate time to speak. And of course, if somebody wants to motion to cease debate, we'd have to deal with that. So, and just one other point that I think staff that came to my mind tonight is points of order are perhaps different than raising your hand. So you may have, as Ian calls it here, the stack of people wishing to speak, but a point of order would take precedence over that. So we will need to figure out how we will deal with points of order to the moderator in a fashion that can work. But we'll look at the alternatives for that if the board gives us the direction to go this route. Thank you.
Thank you. Liz.
I just thought about the time constraints. Usually Lauren has like a morning session and then for about 4 hours, and then you break for lunch, and then there's an afternoon session. And then if it goes beyond that, maybe that's when it could go to the next day. I think we've done that before.
That seems more proper, and then the body can weigh in on which day that should be, because there's going to be many opinions on that. I don't know if we'd be able to fall on a second day ourselves. Lauren, do you have a comment on that? Or? It's okay if you don't.
Yes, I've always tried to get the meeting done in the same day, if at all possible, because you once again, risk excluding people by adjourning or recessing to a subsequent day. Because no matter what day you pick, no one had anticipated in advance that it would flow over onto a second day, whether it was the following day or a week later. One thing is clear, if it does flow over, it really can't be stretched out to a month or two down the road. It's something that has to be concluded fairly quickly. So that would be my only concern for a second day that is not specifically warned. Again, in the interest of trying to not exclude people, which I really think is important when you have a representative town meeting system.
Thank you, Lauren. And I meant to say before, you are interrogated should you wish to be, because that's afraid I missed my opportunity. I think it would be great to take a break, at least for my own selfish needs. Would the board mind if we go to 8:10? Or let's, yeah, 8:10. That gives us a little bit, 14 minutes.
Okay.
Okay. We are in adjournment intermission. I think let's call the meeting back to order at 8:11. And I think, let's see, I had a question for Peter. Do we know if Bob's available still in case a member has a question?
Yes.
A further question?
Yes, I am.
Yep, there he is now.
Thanks, Bob. I don't have a question, but I just anticipated that maybe there was some unanswered. Who knows? And we do have Oscar that was in the stack and possibly a caller that I will make an opportunity for after Oscar. Would you like to join us?
Hello?
Hello.
Oh, just a quick note. Ricky wanted to know, I don't know if this got answered, if cameras would be a requirement at the virtual meeting. Looks like no.
No, I don't believe so. Not a requirement. We certainly would prefer it if it can happen, but I think because of connection issues, we need to make that not a requirement, but a request, just as always.
Okay, and then my comment as town meeting member, District 3, I'd prefer not to do a 2-day meeting, in part because compared to other years, this agenda, even not counting the budget, this agenda looks way less contentious. Like there's nothing obviously on here that would be guaranteed to be a long debate. I mean, stuff could happen anywhere, human services, et cetera, but I don't see anything obviously time consuming. So that's just my preference for a one-shot meeting. And then between the two proposals, I actually don't really have a strong opinion anymore. I think they're both not ideal. Not getting to make amendments, that's a downgrade, but honestly, an 8-hour Zoom meeting, let alone a 13-hour Zoom meeting, is going to be terrible. So whatever you guys decide is fine with me. And that is all. Goodbye.
Thanks, Oscar. Daniel had a smile and a hand up.
I feel like Oscar just answered his own question, right? So like, it's not so much like this agenda is super contentious. It's like a 3-hour long Zoom meeting is plenty. An 8-hour long, you know, so like the last couple of town meetings, so like 8, 10, whatever, you know, I don't want to be on one continuous Zoom meeting for that long. I don't even really want to be on a Zoom meeting for longer than like 2 hours. We do these meetings for as long as they need to be because it's the town's business and the people's business, and that's what we've been asked to do. And, you know, I just think it's important. We broke for a break, but partly also because Tim wanted to go and tend to his kid. right? And like at home, there won't be any childcare available. People are going to have their lives going on off the screen, and we should kind of at least make some accommodation to ease the burden on that. So I don't think we should do 2 days where it's like, you know, we don't know when the second day is or if we'll need it. I think we should say, like, you know, if this was the board's pleasure, that, you know, we should do day 1 is this, and it's from this hour until this hour, and day 2 is from this hour until it gets done. You know, I just think that like this kind of meeting is very draining, and after a while, you know, you get kind of glazed over like a donut. And it ain't ideal. None of this is ideal, obviously. But I think that having at least some parameters gives you something to work with.
Hang on. Oscar, did you want to just quickly respond?
Yeah, just real quick, if that's okay.
Response?
You know, the last thing I want is for anyone to get glazed like a donut, but I just want to point out that, well, first to just say that for me and probably for some other people, a single long meeting is actually less of an inconvenience than spreading out over multiple days. Not a deal breaker. I'm fine with whatever ends up happening, but just want to represent that point of view. And also just to say that, hey, the 13-hour in-person meeting last time was also pretty rough, and my eyes glazed over plenty of times there. So I'm not sure, maybe I'm just more comfortable or more used to this format than other people are or something, but the Zoom meeting experience doesn't feel more draining to me than the in-person meeting. It's just that I know that technical, like going through the actual Robert's rules, stuff like that is going to be pretty rough. But anyway, that's all for real.
Okay, thank you. We did have a couple of other hands up, but Peter, I'm assuming it's...
I can be quick. I wanted to speak to this issue about length of a day and multiple days, just briefly, so that you can have it kind of know that this is an option. I checked in with Bob during the break to make sure that we wouldn't have to be explicit about which items would be considered on which days if you were leaning towards 2 days. And he confirmed that we could warn it in a way that, let's say hypothetically, you chose to do the 12th and 13th. The Saturday that we're talking about plus the next day. It could be warned in a way that says that the meeting's going to happen beginning at 8:30 on the 12th, and if necessary, we'll continue on the 13th. And that would allow the body to choose its tolerance level for the endurance that's required to get through the 19 items.
That's kind of like verbalizing that's usually the case anyway, by my memory of town meeting. But
well, it is, except that this would be explicitly asking the members to keep the 13th available as something that might be necessary. Under normal circumstances, you'd warn it for the 12th, but if it went very long, the group might decide to continue the meeting to a different day.
I was just afraid that it would get into members that could definitely do the 12th, but not do the 13th, and then what do you do with that information? But, sorry to abuse my chair power, just jumping in there. Liz. Oh, can't hear you. It's always one.
I think the only remedy to a shorter meeting is the Australian ballot. So we're either in it or we're not. And it's going to be either be a long meeting for 1 day, 2 days, or we're not. So the only way to shorten the meeting, to my mind, is to have an Australian ballot. And, you know, that's democracy.
Ian, I think, stand up first.
Yeah. Brandy, go ahead. I've talked more.
Okay, there we go. I have to say that after hearing Lauren speak, I've just been angsty and going back and forth. I feel like we have two choices in front of us. One is it's almost like, which is our goal? Is it our goal to ensure that every single voting member gets to vote? Or is it our goal to ensure that there's robust engagement and participation? And I actually think that those are two really different goals this year, and we cannot accommodate both. And so I'm grappling with which one is our goal, because if our goal is to get every single member to definitely be able to register their vote, that's Australian Ballot. And if our goal is to make sure that there's, vibrant and robust conversation, then that's the Zoom meetings. And all of a sudden I'm like going like this. So I just wanted to put out there to contribute to the conversation that I was subtly, after hearing Lauren speak, wavering.
I have a suggestion. Oh, sorry, Ian, go.
Yeah, no, I guess I want to speak to two things. One, yeah, if we're going to do the Zoom meeting, we should warn it for 2 days consecutive. We don't know how this is going to go because it's the first time doing it. I see no reason why we wouldn't want to just do that, just to give Lauren the flexibility and the body the flexibility, knowing that it could move to a second day if it needs to. I think that's almost like not even a question. I think I want to just address Brandy's point for a second and just say that it's not just to encourage lively debate to have the Zoom meeting. It's also to make sure that the body has its full ability to do the amendments. The Australian Ballot would have that first meeting that would have the lively debate, but there would just be no way to modify. So I agree. I agree with Oscar. God, neither of these are perfect. Yeah, and so I think we just need to make a decision, and yeah, I'm leaning towards the Zoom personally.
Thanks, Ian, and thanks, Daniel. I did see that Hillary wanted to chime in on the 2-day question. Hillary, are you with us? So nice to see you.
Hello.
Hi, Hillary.
Can you all hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, excellent. So I just, in hearing what Peter said, Bob said is an option for warning the meeting and saying if we need to go over, identifying the actual day that we're going to, I think is so important for all the reasons that have been mentioned, but also because we have to make sure we have a quorum. And if we schedule the next day for a day that people weren't prepared for, we run into the risk of not having the 78 members present to vote. And so I just think that's a really important piece to keep in mind. If you all opt for Zoom, I agree that a second day should be identified in the warning. Thank you.
Good reminder on quorum, definitely. Luckily, we'll be able to see quorum, hopefully, live. So, Daniel.
I almost did it. I have a strong preference for the Zoom meeting. I know that it is not ideal, and I would like to kind of mitigate the harm of the Zoom meeting as much as possible. I would wonder whether or not, in true online organizing style, we could also like do a doodle poll to see what second date is most preferable to the town meeting members, in much the same way that we polled them about their stuff. And I suppose I'm kind of wondering, like, what is the timeline for that? Like, when do we need to make a hard decision about what date town meeting occurs on?
Peter, yeah, go ahead.
So the answer is yes, of course we can do a doodle poll. I'm not sure we can do a doodle poll and get the results in time for, we were anticipating that if you made a decision tonight, you'd be in a position where you could warn this meeting next Tuesday. And that turnaround time would be very challenging for us to hit, but we could try. Particularly because the warning, it'd be important, I think, with a matter of this significance to have the warning put out on Friday in the form that we expect it to be addressed by you on Tuesday. And I actually don't think it's probably because we have some members who are not, who we had to reach out to in ways other than through email this past time. I think doing a doodle poll in that time frame is problematic. Doing a doodle poll to bring back to you for a later action by you is not problematic. That's easy. And it answers your second question, which is you don't have a deadline other than the fact that we're already coming to the 1st of August and still trying to find our way forward. At this point, the meeting date that we're targeting, if you do warn it next Tuesday night, would be September 12th. Because of Rosh Hashanah, likely we fall back to September 26th if we don't warn it in time to be held on the 12th. And that doesn't violate anything. It just gets later and later and later into the fiscal year that, we're at this point, since we're close to a solution, we have, staff have been trying to bring this to a place where you could find closure and move it forward. But if your consensus is, yeah, we are close, but we need a little more feedback from the members, and you want to put this on the August 18th agenda or hold a special meeting sometime during August for it, then that's an alternative.
Well, Liz, maybe you're going to ask the same thing I was going to ask.
Well, I was just reminding us all what Lauren said, that he usually likes to have them, he prefers a long day, or if needs be, immediately following. So that would be the Sunday. So that everybody's thought process are fresh for the day and then into the following day.
Could I make one other thing clear about the calendar? Just not an opinion, but just a clarification that the prior Saturday is Labor Day weekend. So that's why we're focused on the 12th. We otherwise could have been focused on the 5th and still met the statutory requirements, that 30 to 40 days thing. But the 5th doesn't work because it's Labor Day weekend. The 19th doesn't work because it's Rosh Hashanah. So we got the 12th and the 26th that we're working with in September.
Daniel, you had your hand up.
Sorry. I think that we should at least inquire of the RTM members who are going to be expected to attend whether they would prefer like 12th and 13th or 12th and 26th. Like maybe we don't need to give them like a million options, but at least.
Well, this gets to my question that I held back. What's stopping us from naming a date certain, but then naming a second date?
Like a plan to be named later.
Like, can we name the 12th?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the second part of your sentence.
Can we allow the deliberation on the second date to occur after we decide tonight that we're going to hold it on the 12th? I mean,
it's Hillary's question about
the warning. I'm sorry, Liz.
Well, it's just Hillary's comment about the quorum.
Okay, and Hillary would like to speak again if that's okay with everyone.
Hello again. So I just wanted to point out with calendar, I know that we were talking about Rosh Hashanah being on the 19th. If the meeting didn't get one next week and we went for the 26th, I just want to point out that the 27th is Yom Kippur. So you couldn't, or not that you couldn't, but you just want to be mindful of if you did the 26th, 27th, the 27th might be an issue. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Hillary. So,
Bob Fisher would like to speak.
Well, not to belabor this, but just as an option, you would have the ability to warn it for Saturday the 12th and, for instance, Monday the 14th or Tuesday the 15th as the continuation part of it. That, from a warning standpoint, so long as you could put it in the warning that any need to go into a second day, the second day will occur on such and such second day at such and such time, that will suffice as to the warning. So I just want you to be clear, it doesn't have to be the next day, it doesn't have to be a week later, you have those options. Certainly trying to get it done in one day, I echo what Lauren had said, but it's certainly up to you as the board. So thank you.
Thanks, Bob. Peter?
Can I ask a question of Bob? If it was warned for the 12th and 26th, is there any concern for the fact that the 26th is after the 40th day?
I don't believe so. I can double check that tomorrow, but the meeting will have commenced within the 30 to 40 days. And the second part of the meeting is really just an adjournment or a continuation of the meeting. So it would be no different than if somebody moved to adjourn the meeting to a date certain under Robert's rules for 2 weeks later. So I think that can be done. I'll just double check that, Peter, tomorrow.
Can someone remind me, just because I've lost it, is something wrong with the 13th?
No.
No. Other than there was a question being raised about members might prefer not to have to do the 2 consecutive days and might show us a preference for a gap in between the 2 days.
Ian?
I have participated in a number of meetings with many fewer than the number who will be at RTM in trying to find another date. And it has been a mess. I feel like we have really done our due diligence in talking to the community and talking to RTM representatives, and it's now our responsibility to sort of make the decision, make the dates, and warn this and get it going.
I tend to agree. Daniel did want to speak, though.
Let me say the exact opposite of that. Nothing about us without us, right? So if we listen to what we had all said last week and what the community said to us last week, we would not make this decision about when a second date was without, at the very least, I'm not saying like we open up all possible dates, but we say we're thinking we'll start it on the 12th, and would you prefer the second day, if necessary, to be on the 13th or the 26th? And then, and then we have more likelihood that we'll have a quorum on that second day if we need to have a second day. Maybe we finish the meeting in 4 hours. There's no way.
Right. I mean, honestly, I understand that there's going to be challenges to this meeting versus others, but Oscar's point that it doesn't look, knock on wood, touch wood, whatever your phrase is, it doesn't look that complicated in many respects, certainly not as contentious as last year's. And I don't remember ever pre-setting a second date. The tradition in town meeting has been meet on a Saturday, and if necessary, continue into Sunday, but you never want to talk about it out loud. Or another date that is decided at that meeting. So, I mean, I think is this analysis paralysis right now? Is this what, I mean, it's just, go ahead, Daniel.
I just want to say the reason for the second date was not that like we think it's going to be this interminable long day and then we have to do a second day. It's this platform is a killer for long meetings. Can we please chunk it up into 2 chunks of a specific time limit? And if so, when should that second date be?
Bob spoke earlier tonight to the fact that it can't be a pre-designated specific time limit, but if it's warned in a way that it's this day plus, if necessary, that day, it gives the body the opportunity to decide when it's getting too tired to continue.
Okay, so we couldn't say it would begin at 8:30 and end at 1 p.m.
No.
Okay,
you could not warn it that way. It would just be a second day if necessary, and the body would decide during the course of the first day whether the second day was necessary.
But maybe at 12 o'clock we could make a point of order and blah, 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 and ask a question and have people vote. All right. That's helpful. Thanks.
Well, I'm just reminding us of all the things that Lauren said and just the tradition of, yeah. And also Oscar, these meetings are long. They're, you know, they're based on the will of the representatives and they go long. It's a long day. Everybody's prepared for that.
So to summarize this, we basically can say it's going to be on the 12th and the 13th, the 12th and the 26th, or just on the 12th, or just on the 26th. Or we could do Daniel, Honorable Select Board Member Quip's suggestion of we ask the body with a doodle poll as to which of those two second days. So it would be the 12th, and then we ask, would we prefer to do the 13th or the 26th? Keeping in mind Hillary's points on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur.
I think my proposal was based on a misunderstanding of how we could warn it. I thought it was like we could literally say it occurs from this hour to this hour, and whatever needs to get done then gets done on the second day. So
that's what I thought. Okay. Yeah. All right. I propose that we warn this for the 12th and the 13th.
The 13th if necessary?
Well, yeah.
Are we getting ahead of ourselves? Have we all voted that we want the Zoom meeting as opposed to Australian ballot?
You're absolutely right, Liz. Sorry.
That's a Z, sort of.
Well, I think we were trying to put it all together into a motion that had the dates in it, I guess. But what do you need from us procedurally, Peter? You need a vote for date certain, and
you don't need to make a motion and take an action tonight, but I need to know that a week from tonight, if where you land is you want to have a Zoom meeting, either just for the 12th or for the 12th and the 13th or the 12th and the 26th, then I need to know what choice you've made so we can bring you a proper warning for that meeting. And, you know, Liz's point is well taken. There are others of you who have said, you know, I'm still wrestling with the idea of which one might be better. It seems that we're leaning towards Zoom, you're leaning towards Zoom, but you haven't made that decision. So if you give us clarity about Zoom versus Australian ballot, and if it is to be Zoom, which of those second, I think it is true. One of you said an hour ago or half an hour ago, it doesn't make any sense not to have an if necessary day tagged on to this particular warning because of the uncertainties we have. So I think, you know, my strong advice to you would be if you choose Zoom, choose either the 13th or the 26th for the potential second day. And then you'll have told me everything I need to know so we can bring you a proper warning for next Tuesday night.
okay. So in the spirit of consensus, do you want everyone just raise their hand if they indeed are heading towards just Zoom, period? Is that something everyone is leaning towards? Okay. Me too. And I would advocate strongly for talking about the 12th and the 13th. If nothing else, just remembering what the heck you were talking about.
Yep.
How do you feel about that, Daniel? You're the only hand I didn't see go up. So.
I am thoroughly ambivalent about the matter and will attend on whichever date we choose. You know, I think that, you know, I mean, if we're going to have a meeting that doesn't have a time limit, then I'm sure that as in all town meetings that I'm aware of recently, it'll just happen in the same day and it'll be as long as it needs to be. My preference would be that that was not how it went, but that's not what's possible with the warnings, so it's rather moot.
Okay, that feels like clarity to me, Peter.
Got it.
How about staff?
12th and 13th on Zoom. That's crystal clear, and we'll have that warning in your packet on Friday so that you can act on it next Tuesday.
Fantastic. Wait, 2 hands just went up. I'm not sure which was first. So Ian and Daniel
Ian's
will
was
fight that.
Ian's was
Case
first.
I just also wanted to give a quick shout out to Bob for drafting that legal brief. I'm usually the one in my day life who does the briefing, so it's very nice to get a really solid legal brief. And I think that for the RTM, it was really important for that to be really spelled out. I'm glad that we have that artifact now for people to refer to, because I knew there was a lot of confusion. So I just really thank you very much, Bob, for doing that. And I would encourage anyone who is confused about the budget and what went on or what can happen or can't happen to review that. Yeah.
You're very welcome.
Thanks. Thanks, Bob. Daniel?
Yeah, before we disappear, I want to put in a couple of plugs for some things that we might do in order to prepare to have a good Zoom meeting. So I spoke earlier about making that BCTV recording of the information session available, like explicitly, and pushing it out to the members. I think that there's an opportunity here to do some like training that, you know, so we're going to do like a practice session. But I would say that possibly in addition or even in lieu of a practice session, that we actually record some instructional videos on how to use this platform for the things that we're intending to use it for, and make those available so that anyone who doesn't attend the session can watch and can rewatch and, you know, pause and whatnot and practice. And I think that in those instructional videos, there should be stuff about people's microphones, cameras, how to write your name in there. And I just want to make a plug for people putting a name in there that the moderator will use for them, so that nobody is, you know, mispronounced or misgendered, that people are, you know, talked to in the way that they would like to be talked to. In the town meetings that I've been to, it's often Mr. So-and-so or Miss So-and-so, and sometimes those assumptions can cause harm. So I think town meeting members, if they're aware of it, can put something in their little window that will, like, you know, be like a name tag, and that will help us all have a good experience. And then the other thing I would like to see in some kind of like preparatory material is a really good explanation of all the different permutations of Robert's rules as it pertains to our town meeting. You know, I am not a big Robert's rules expert. It would always be good to know more on how to do things and what this means and what that means. And I just think that because this is going to happen differently than usual, we just have an opportunity here to provide more material to support meeting members do a great job.
Thank you for all that.
I want to say.
I think that's all perfectly in line. That puts more definition to what we already knew would be necessary in terms of technical support for the members to be able to fully participate in the meeting. So thanks for that, and we'll be working on it.
Yeah, and you're welcome. If you recall, I did prepare a document for early on for select board meetings about how to, you know, make sure everybody can see you, so you don't have a window behind you and all that stuff. That might come in handy. And vis-a-vis Robert's rules, I have a couple of excellent Robert's rules, little small books, and I know they're available out there. So just something to think about. It's like a condensed version of all the rules, and I used to carry it around to meetings like a nerd. But
you could use that Robert's Rules book to record a little video using your video skills for
I
members.
volunteer you to do that. I think you'd be excellent at it. I'm gonna help with transcripts. Liz.
Maybe Robert, maybe Marshall Wheelock could be interrogated to be in this video, because that's the session that he gives before the meeting starts.
Yeah, And we'll confer with Marshall. It also, I wasn't going to go down this rabbit hole because it's not really something you need to address tonight, but there's already some discussion that we've had with Lauren and among our group around the fact that Roberts may not fully and precisely enough apply to the circumstances of this kind of meeting. And so there's going to have to be some thought given to what does that mean for us? And Lauren is already, in the process of thinking about what does that mean for him in terms of the role he plays to keep it orderly and fair as the meeting unfolds. And so we don't know, that's kind of like the voting question. We know that that's fundamentally important to having a good meeting, and we don't know exactly where it's going to land, but we're aware of it as an issue. We've begun to work on it.
Awesome. Thanks, Peter. Okay, anything, I don't even have my agenda in front of me. Is there anything else we need to discuss?
Daniel, I'll be in the video with you for the how to use Zoom.
That's great. I love it.
Let's do it.
I won't say any more. Thank you for the video suggestion. Okay. Anyone want to make an actual motion, which we haven't had at this meeting, except for the minutes? I don't mean vis-a-vis RTM, I mean for adjournment. Liz?
I move to adjourn.
Thanks. Liz has moved to adjourn the meeting. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
5-0. Thank you, everyone.